Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.net. Thanks for tuning in this morning, and it's my pleasure to be here. I wish now to continue our reading and discussion of the book The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson, probably one of the most important books that I've ever read here on Inquisition Update. Important not just for me, but for every American. This book should be read by every American. It should be distributed and talked about, because the very subjects that R.W. Thompson is addressing in these books are now of prime concern to every American. Now, this will become readily apparent as we continue our reading and discussion of this book. Last time we ended on page 461, the last full paragraph, but to recap just a little bit, we're talking about the period of the reign of King John in England and how the papacy literally reduced King John and, matter of fact, England, not just King John, but the entire English domain as a fiefdom of the Pope. Completely humiliated King John and proclaimed itself, the papacy, Pope Innocent III, claimed himself to be the King of England. And through an extortion, the Pope gained King John's perfect allegiance. And in an attempt to appease the English barons and the people who demanded their rights, King John granted the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, which the papacy viewed as an unacceptable extortion of the Pope's divine right to rule as he sees fit, and giving the rights of the people to govern. Now, the papacy believes that it is the replacement of the Son of God on earth, that it has the sole prerogative in the world to rule. And it rules not at the behest of man, but at the behest of God. And it is through that divine right that the Pope asserts to itself the right to seat and unseat the kings of the earth, and they rule at the Pope's behest. And that at the bottom of this pyramid of power are the people, which have no right to govern, no right to rule, that they must be ruled by the vicar of Christ through the kings that the Pope picks. Now, this puts the king in a precarious position between God on earth, the Pope, and the people. The Pope insisting that the people are slaves and to be governed, and the people asserting that they are the temples of the Holy Spirit in possession of God himself within their spirit, his law written upon their hearts, and they don't need a king or a pope. Okay, this is popular liberty as we understand it to mean. And so the war continued between the people and the popes of Rome, with King John reduced to vassalage in the middle. And at one point, King John granted to the people a charter called the Magna Carta, a charter of liberties. And that incensed the Pope and put both the people and particularly the barons who insisted on adopting this Magna Carta, reestablishing the rights of the people. The Pope saw that as a threat to his divine right to rule. And so the struggle continues. And we ended last time with a quote. It says, "Lastly, England was become the fief of the Holy See, and they, that is the barons, could not be ignorant that if the king had the will, he had not at least the power to give away the rights of the crown without the consent of his feudal superior, the Pope." In other words, the barons were asserting that if if the King of England, the lawful King of England, decided that he would give liberties and certain rights to the people, it was not within the power of the Pope to limit that gift or to take it away. And that's what King John tried to do in granting them liberties under the Magna Carta by adopting that Charter of Liberties. Now it says, he, the Pope, was therefore bound to annul the concessions which had been extorted from John, they say, as having been obtained in contempt of the Holy See. You see, giving liberty to the people is viewed by the papacy as demonstrating contempt for the Holy See. That is the papacy, which demands the right to, without restriction, govern the people as he sees fit, to enslave them. John was attempting to give them liberty under the Magna Carta, the Charter of Liberties, and this was an assault, as viewed by the papacy, this was an assault upon the papal throne. Okay? It says, he, the Pope, was therefore bound to annul the concessions which had been extorted from John, as having been obtained in contempt of the Holy See, to the degradation of royalty, to the disgrace of the nation, and to the impediment of the crusade, unquote. Now, R.W. Thompson concludes that quote with some comments. They're very important. Listen to what he says. He said, could anything show more satisfactorily the nature of divine power over the temporal affairs of nations exercised by Pope Innocent III and now reasserted by Pope Pius IX? In this particular case, it went to the extent of claiming plenary jurisdiction over the entire domestic policy of the kingdom by denying to the king any power to grant additional liberties to the English people without the consent of the Pope. So here you can see how thoroughly the Pope ruled England. King John wished to give liberties to his people, and he consented to the adoption, the signing of the Charter of Liberties, the Magna Carta. And the papacy was furious that his act degraded the kingship, the royalty, and was a virtual attack upon the papal throne in granting the people liberty. Now, he continues, he said, it assumed that King John, without the consent of the nation, could make England a fief to the Pope, and to lay its crown at his feet, but could do no act tending to give the people the right to be consulted about the laws by which they were to be governed. It attempted to legitimate the highest crime which a king can commit, the treacherous surrender of his crown, by covering it up with the divine sanctions, as if God had designed that the papacy should be built up by the sacrifice of all truth, justice, and honor. It was such an act of deep, indelible infamy as time cannot wipe out. And why are we, in this age, justified in so considering it? Not merely because the precedent thus established has furnished a rule of action for other popes in their attempts to subordinate all nations and peoples to themselves, but for other reasons which will readily occur to a thoughtful mind. Magna Carta shines as a bright light in history. It was the beginning of that great uprising of the English people which enabled them to take the lead among the advancing nations. It is the cornerstone of all popular government as it now exists. But for it, kingly and papal absolutism might today be holding its universal carnival. And yet we're told by an infallible pope that such an act, so glorious in all its consequences, was, quote, in contempt of the Holy See, unquote. Why? Because it tended to the degradation of royalty by putting into the hands of the people rights which they derived from God and nature. John, thus released from the obligation of his oath by the dispensing power of the Pope, set on foot an army of foreigners to punish the barons and ravage the country. The barons defied the thunders of the Pope and the armies of the king. The latter had no higher object than plunder. That's right, these foreign mercenaries had no higher object or motivation than to simply plunder the country. And that's how the Pope reacted when the people got their rights through the Magna Carta. Just destroy the country with foreigners that have no allegiance whatsoever to England or the people and are only there to get their booty and reward. Using a foreign army of mercenaries to destroy England. See, when the Pope doesn't get his way, he just throws a fit. And that's what this is. It says the latter had no higher object than plunder, and the effect was that the country was reduced to a most deplorable condition, the private property of the barons being seized and appropriated by foreign mercenaries. They just pillaged the country. And it says the Pope excommunicated the barons merely because they were unwilling to be made slaves, and not for any violation of their religious faith. He ordered Langton, his legate, to publish the bull of excommunication in England to intimidate the barons. But Langton, though faithful to his religion, remember he was Catholic, he was a papal legate, had not forgotten that he was an Englishman, and he refused to perform the degrading and disgraceful act. And for this act of devotion to his native country, he was suspended by the Pope from the Archbishopric of Canterbury, which was designed to stamp him with the indelible mark of disgrace. The bull, however, was published, but the barons again defied it, because they were not particularly named in it. The Pope, to remove this objection, issued another, excommunicating them by name, and putting their lands, as well as the city of London, which took the side of the barons, under interdict. Again, they refused obedience, declaring in the spirit of true Englishmen that, quote, it was not the Pope's business to meddle in the temporal affairs, seeing that St. Peter had received from Christ none but spiritual power, for which reason it was neither just nor right that Christians should suffer themselves to be swayed by the ambition and avarice of popes, unquote. They were Roman Catholics in religious faith, strongly attached to their church and the traditions of its early purity and greatness, but unwilling to surrender the independence of their country to either a treacherous king or a domineering pope. They were resolved that they would not become the mere slaves to the temporal power of Pope Innocent III, which Pope Innocent III claimed the divine right to exercise over them. And they determined to stand by and to restore the liberties which they considered the birthright of the English people. They did this with a courage which has endeared to every lover of popular liberty the memory of these hardy but unlettered old barons, who defied not only the king, but one of the most powerful and ambitious of the popes. Their firm adherence to their demand for freedom kept the principles of English liberty alive in the minds of the people, and who had never yet forgotten their ancient Christianity or the teachings of their Saxon ancestors. And by way of review, he has just now categorized the British people into two groups, and he's referring to the ancient Britons, as we talked about early on in English history, the ancient Britons who were evangelized by the Apostle Paul and his helpers. Remember, Paul's missions went to the extremities of the West. And though England is never specifically mentioned, we have to assume that Paul's ministry stretched as far as England. And these people received the gospel from Paul's hand. And they held to the liberties that the gospel of Jesus Christ imparted to them. All right? They became the possessors of truth. They became the vessels within which the Holy Spirit resided, and that God's law was written upon their heart. They had a law. They had a king. They had a Christ. And they were not easily governed by despots like popes. And also he's referring to the Saxons, those Teutonics, whose liberties were maintained as a matter of natural right. Having never been evangelized with the gospel, their ancient tradition was that they elected their own governments and then held their kings to account. And the kings rendered justice and protected the liberties of the people. And if not, the Saxon people overthrew them and put a king on the throne that would rule justly. These two people, the Britons and the Saxons, melded together. They intermarried and they became a people sharing the ancient belief that the people should govern and that the king should be responsive to the people and govern justly with the people's oversight. So this is what he's referring to when he says the ancient Christianity. He's speaking of the Britons and also the teachings of their Saxon ancestors. He's speaking now of the Teutons. Now, these principles survived every shock they received and enabled the people to bear themselves up under every load of oppression with which the kings and the popes endeavored to crush them. Pope Innocent III and King John have passed away. Of the former, that is, Pope Innocent III, it is related by a Roman Catholic pen that after death he was seen in a vision by St. Luthgard, a nun, to whom he said that, quote, he could not enter heaven until the day of judgment, and after having suffered tortures incomprehensible by the human mind, unquote, on account of the monstrous enormities of his crimes. The world's greatest bard, in almost the last words put into the mouth of the latter, makes him say, quote, within me is hell, and there the poison is a fiend, confined to tyrannize on unreprovable, condemned blood, unquote. Yet, the principles of Magna Carta have lived, grown, and expanded, and will continue to live, grow, and expand until the chains of absolutism shall have been broken, and there shall be no bands upon either the limbs or the minds of men. During the subsequent reign of King Henry III, one of the most disgraceful in English history, the liberties of the people were almost entirely destroyed. The popes, by the appointment of Italian ecclesiastics, had created in England an army of foreign priests who were exclusively devoted to Rome and who had no sympathies in common with the English people, and who, scattered all over the country, impoverished it by their enormous exactions of money. Now, we even suffered a period of this in this country where the papacy flooded the United States with foreign priests who had no loyalty to America whatsoever, had no filial bond with the Roman Catholics of this country, and were loyal strictly to the Pope. They were in a foreign land. They were simply doing what the Pope told them to do. And it became a real concern in this country what purpose these foreign priests really were for the Pope. Could they be trusted in this land? having no ties to the country, having even no real ties with the people under their ministries, being from foreign countries, many of them Italian and Irish Roman Catholic priests, yet the papacy sent them here to turn them against their native land. It was a real concern in this country, but Rome was expert at using foreign priests to infiltrate a country which they sought to control. And this is exactly what happened in England. Excuse me. Okay, again, we're talking about the papacy's attempt to maintain its iron grip on England. And it says, during the subsequent reign of Henry III, one of the most disgraceful in English history, the liberties of the people were almost entirely destroyed. The popes, by the appointment of Italian ecclesiastics, the popes appointed Italian priests and sent them to England as an army in support of the papacy. So we have Roman Catholic priests coming into the country under the guise and protection of religious liberty, and they're simply CIA agents for the Pope. Okay? The popes, by the appointment of Italian ecclesiastics, had created in England an army of foreign priests who were exclusively devoted to Rome, who had no sympathies in common with the English people, and who, scattered all over the country, impoverished it by their enormous exactions of money. Okay? They're going to rob the people of the money. Now, the king, obeying the Pope, also made an effort to annul the Great Charter. That's the Magna Carta, although he had solemnly promised at the beginning of his reign to observe it. He excused himself for this attempt to violate his promise upon the ground that he was a minor when it was made. The Pope and the king, quote, mutually stood by one another whenever the business was to extort money, unquote, from the people. The Pope made every possible effort to alienate the affections of the king from his English subjects by causing him to call still more foreigners devoted to the papacy to assist him in conducting public affairs. So here you see these priests aren't in the country to just, quote-unquote, preach the gospel. The gospel is the farthest thing from their mind. They are agents of the Pope sent to England to occupy the court of the king and to help him govern the nation as the Pope sees fit. And that's the same concern that was once held in this country regarding the foreign priests that Rome had sent here. And it's the same concern today as it was then. It's just not acknowledged or talked about. The priests of Rome, whether they be domestic Americans or Italian or Irish or German or what, have their first loyalty to the Pope. And we'll continue with our reading and discussion of the book, The Papacy and the Civil Power, when we come back from the break.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the left behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Okay, welcome back from the break. You're listening to the second half hour of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. I have a new blog up. You can check it out at the old website address, www.inquisitionupdate.org. That's INQUISITION update.org. And I make an entry every day recapping what we talk about here in the book. And then also, if you wish, you can click on a link to the old web page and you'll find the resource materials there. And I appreciate any comments, positive or negative, about the website. And I hope my listeners will find the value of it and avail themselves of it. And tell your friends. Also, if you have comments, suggestions, criticisms, or encouragements, please email me, tom@seawaves.us. The waves of the sea. tom@seawaves.us. And I generally answer every email that requires an answer, so please feel free, write and get acquainted. Ask questions if you prefer, and I'll do my best to answer them. Now we'll continue. It says, the Pope made every possible effort to alienate the affections of the king from his English subjects by causing him to call still more foreigners devoted to the papacy to assist him in conducting public affairs. That's right. These foreigners brought to England were simply to help the king govern the nation according to the dictates of the papacy. And it was necessary to use foreigners because had they used domestics, they would have had some loyalty to the people, some loyalty to the nation, a natural aversion to the fomentation of civil wars that ravaged the country. Okay? They would have sought to make some appeasement between the people and the king, or to ally, if possible, the people and the king, to make them a people and to cut the Pope out. That system never works for the papacy. So foreigners are crowding the court of King Henry III to make sure that the Pope remains in control. All right? Now, it says, and when Parliament complained of this, the Bishop of Winchester, speaking for the Pope, rebuked them upon the ground that it was an encroachment upon the royal prerogative, unquote. Nearly all the money of the kingdom was remitted to Rome. There's the bottom line. It was all about money. And it was all about taking the money from England and sending it to Rome. And it says, and the Pope acquired such power over King Henry III that under the threat of excommunication, he obtained a renewal of the concession of John that the crown should remain in vassalage to the Holy See. All right? Simply means that the Pope is the one who truly wears the crown of England. All right? At this point, Henry is just simply an administrator for the Pope. He has no loyalty to the people. And every attempt to give liberties to the people and to reign for their benefit is seen as an encroachment or a violation of the Pope's divine right to rule. Now, it says the English bishops, stimulated by the Pope, claimed jurisdiction over civil affairs. All right? What's the rightful affairs of a bishop? The gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, we're talking about the definition of a bishop in the Bible is the gospel of Jesus Christ and to be a servant to the people. That's what a bishop is to be in the Church of Jesus Christ. A servant of the people. But these bishops, these Roman Catholic bishops, answered to the Pope, not to the people. And they claimed jurisdiction in civil affairs, not religious affairs. They were governors. And that's the position the bishops of Rome always assume wherever they are, and that means everywhere. Roman Catholicism is a global religion, but you must understand first and foremost that a Roman Catholic bishop is a political power, not a religious one. Okay? They promote their religion by getting control of the civil power and imposing Roman Catholic canon law through civil law. So they first and foremost rule in the halls of government. It says the English bishops, stimulated by the Pope, claimed jurisdiction over civil affairs upon the pretense that there was hardly any case but that what religion was concerned with. The logical result of the papal demand that the Pope shall be regarded as infallible upon all questions of morals as well as faith. Okay? So they believe that the Pope is infallible and that he has a divine right, a divine sanction by God to rule over spiritual and temporal affairs. So a Roman Catholic bishop has more authority in the halls of government than he even does in the church, because the moral or the temporal affairs of the Roman Catholic Church are paramount. And it's only through their control of government that the Roman Catholic Church is supported. I've said this before, and maybe it'll sound a little bit repetitious to my regular listeners, but we have to understand that Roman Catholicism, let me put it this way. People do not become Roman Catholics. They're born Roman Catholics. And so to evangelize, the papacy is forced, or the papacy is motivated to get control of the people by force. And the only way to apply that force is through the civil power. And now you can understand more fully why politics is so important to the bishops of the Roman Catholic Church. And it says, the king obtained innumerable subsidies upon promises which he violated as soon as he received the money, and all of which his perfidious conduct was approved by the Pope, who was always ready to grant him a dispensation or a forgiveness of his sin of violating the most solemn engagements when their mutual interests were thereby advanced. Look, every time the Pope or every time the King of England made a concession to the people to get their support, as soon as the money started flowing in, the Pope granted him an indulgence or a dispensation to violate his commitment to the people. And he simply pocketed the money and shipped it to Rome. And how long did this happen in England before the people finally raised up and put a stop to this? It says the popes considered England as a conquered country, its kings their vassals, and its people as having no rights of any value whatsoever when they came in conflict with the demands of the papacy. This is what it's like to be under a papal theocracy. The people have no rights. The people have no rights. And it says they entertain appeals in almost every matter of controversy, and the people were compelled to spend immense sums of money in traveling to Rome to solicit their favor. They converted Peter pence into a tribute to the chair of Peter and practiced the most rigorous measures for its collection. Kind of sounds like the IRS, doesn't it? They organized a compact body of ecclesiastics trained to obedience and submission, who in regard to the laws of the kingdom took the side of the popes against the people, as if they were the absolute and only sovereigns of the country. These Roman Catholic priests, sent to England by the popes, these foreign priests, became absolutists. They ruled the country. They demanded that the civil courts should have no jurisdiction to try and condemn ecclesiastics, even for the most enormous crimes. Now here we're getting back to the reference of the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. Twofold purpose for the Roman Catholic canon law was to assert the divine right of the Pope over the kings and the peoples of the earth, and to grant immunity to the Pope and his priests. No one may hold them to account because they're divine. Okay? If power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is the case in this one and every other case, that these priests, when asserting their divine right, when given their divine right, permitted by the people, they become tyrants, lawless, godless tyrants. And they simply claim immunity. You can't try me in a court of law, because the civil courts are beneath the spiritual. I'm operating under the spiritual head in Rome, and your civil courts are a vassal of that spiritual head, and you have no jurisdiction over a Roman Catholic priest in the civil courts. He may commit whatever crime, and if it ever is adjudged, it can only be adjudged by the Pope. Okay? Conflict of interest is the name of the game in the Roman Catholic Church. The fox watching the hen house is the name of the game in Romanism. The priests are untouchable. And it says the process of excommunication, in addition to this plenary immunity from civil oversight, it says the process of excommunication was entirely perverted from its original meaning and made to serve the temporal uses of the Pope upon trivial, no less than upon grave occasions, being employed to punish trifling acts of disobedience, to raise money, and for almost every imaginable purpose but of the advancement of the gospel. Okay? So, if you don't obey your bishop, if you don't pay a certain amount of money to the church, the bishops would abuse their power and excommunicate you. And it bears repeating that excommunication to a Roman Catholic means eternal damnation, because they're taught from cradle to grave that there's no salvation outside the Roman Catholic Church. And if you're excommunicated from the Roman Catholic Church, you're separated from heaven permanently. So this is extortion, okay? By anybody's legal definition, this is spiritual and physical extortion. And it says, it would be impossible to enumerate, indeed, within a compass less than a volume, the outrages and enormities practiced in England during this gloomy period by kings and popes who considered the assertion of any singular popular right as a crime which God had appointed them to punish. The power, oppressions, and vices of the papacy had nearly reached their culminating point, and the pure religion of Jesus Christ and his apostles, which was designed to purify and refine the heart and the soul of man, was entirely subordinated to temporal and selfish ends, and made to play the ignoble part of ministering to the world ambition of the popes and their prostituted armies of ecclesiastics. The barons would have been unworthy of the name of Englishmen if they had not resisted these encroachments upon the rights and liberties of the people, with those interests and happiness of their own had now become inseparably identified. Okay? So because of the mutual oppression of the popes and the kings against the people, the bishops, or the barons, sided with the people. Okay? And it says the reciprocal hatred which had once existed between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans, remember the Britons, or rather the barons, were Normans. They were, let's say, Frenchmen that were brought to England to serve in government, because the Pope thought that these Frenchmen would be far more loyal to the Pope than the Saxon kings who previously ruled over England. Excuse me. But the CIA calls this blowback, this type of thing. It's a plan of the Pope that backfired. These Norman bards, or these Norman barons, eventually found common ground with the Anglo-Saxons, or the Britons and the Saxons. And they joined with the people to throw off the tyranny of the papally controlled king. All right, so you have the barons and the people allied against the king and the pope. And it says, again, the reciprocal hatred which had once existed between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans had, like that between the native Britons and the Saxons, given way before the sense of common injuries and the threatened loss of their common liberties. Okay, so the natural hatred that existed was simply erased, and these people became trusted friends because of the enormities and the injustices rendered by the popes and the kings. Now, here I'm going to stop and read a note that R.W. Thompson includes in the book right here. He says more than 100 murders were committed by ecclesiastics during the reign of Henry II, in which the parties were not even punished by degradation. In other words, they weren't even criticized. These ecclesiastics, these priests committing murders, you couldn't even criticize them. It says the clergy had absolute power over their own body, and no appeal was allowed from their decisions. A layman forfeited his life by the crime of murder, but an ecclesiastic went unpunished. In other words, a normal Englishman, if he committed murder, he answered by being killed himself. Justice. Okay? But a priest of the Roman Catholic Church who committed murder was simply unpunished. And it says this was called one of the immunities of the clergy. This is reiterating what we learned before. The civil courts had no jurisdiction. And if the Pope saw nothing wrong in the priest committing a murder, which was generally the case, they went unpunished. And it says a clergyman committed a murder in 1163 and being tried by an ecclesiastical court was sentenced merely to lose his benefice and be confined to a monastery. So they simply put him on easy street, right? They took away his benefice or whatever benefit he was getting from the church, but then they put him up in a monastery, took care of him. And it says the king complained that he ought to have been tried as a layman in the civil courts, but the clergy objected. The king remained firm, and it was finally agreed, among other things, that this should hereafter be done. In other words, they should be tried in the civil courts. But when the Pope was informed of this, he refused his sanction and denounced it as, quote, prejudicial to the church and destructive of her privileges, unquote. In other words, the privileges of the Roman Catholic Church is to be a tyrant upon the earth, completely immune from both the laws of God and the laws of men. And this is the very attitude that lies behind the global priest pedophile pandemic. And it's up to the people of this world to put a stop to it and to insist that these priests be tried in civil courts. And I don't advocate vigilante justice. But I'll tell you what, it would take a power from heaven itself to stop me from rendering justice to a Roman Catholic priest that abused my little boy. And my heart goes out to every victim of these pedophile priests. Their hearts screaming out for justice. Many of them Roman Catholics devoted to their church, and they see the injustice of the Roman Catholic priesthood that skate when they commit the most horrendous crimes against their own children. Okay, where was I? They had gradually worn away the Norman prejudices and had retained their own language and enough of their ancient laws and customs to furnish an ultimate barrier against the encroachment of kings and popes, their common and implacable enemies. Still talking about the alliance that formed between the English barons and the Angles and the Saxons. And it says the barons, realizing this, firmly maintained their ground on the side of the people and resolved upon grappling royalty itself by the throat, if its hold upon the country could not otherwise be broken. The struggle was one which called for an exhibition of the highest and noblest qualities of English character. The ancient liberties were to be snatched from the grasp of royal and papal imperialism and given back to the people from whom they had been wrenched by usurpation, to be sacredly preserved as belonging of right to every Englishman and as the foundation of the world's future progress. You see what's in the balance right here in this example in England, the future progress of the nations rested in England at this time. And it was these English barons, united with the people, that wrested from the Pope and his puppet king the rights of the people and gave it back to the people. And had it not been for them, there would have been no Magna Carta, and there would have been no democracy or no republic, constitutional republic of the United States of America that's based on the liberties won by these English barons. The Magna Carta. It was a charter with the people, giving them certain inalienable rights. It forms the basis of our Constitution and civil rights. Now it says the firmness and resolution of the barons constrained the king to grant important concessions. 24 commissioners were appointed, one half by the king and the other by the barons, to provide redress for public grievances. These provided for the confirmation of the Great Charter, the Magna Carta, and the introduction for the first time of the representatives of the commons, that is, of the people, into Parliament. You see what they got from the Magna Carta? The House of Commons. The people literally had a voice in government. An accepted, established, and permanent role in government. That's the Magna Carta. And it says, the establishment of this House of Commons for the people into Parliament, a measure imperfect as it was at first, which was based upon the natural and inalienable right of the people to give or withhold their assent to all laws by which it is proposed to govern them. Representative government. That's what we got out of the Magna Carta, and that's what we got from these Norman barons, these Roman Catholics, by the way, who held to Protestant beliefs, that the Pope nor the King had any power that could strip the people of their natural God-given rights. We'll continue with the papacy and the civil power tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Thanks for listening.
Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.